The left is losing it over the South Afrikaners coming here. These are white South Africans that have been basically subjected to tremendous genocide and violence there in their home country, in South Africa. But for some reason, the left rationalizes it because they're saying, well, their ancestors were the ones that created apartheid, so therefore it's fine, whatever happens to them. Donald Trump's not having it. Listen to his comments.
Because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. Now, South Africa leadership is coming to see me, I understand, sometime next week. And, we're supposed to have I guess a G20 meeting there or something, but we're having a G20 meeting. I don't know how we can go unless that situation's taken care of, but it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place. And farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media, doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about. And I don't care who they are. I don't care about their race, their color. I don't care about their height, their weight. I don't care about anything. I just know that what's happening is terrible. I have people that live in South Africa. They say it's a terrible situation taking place. So we've essentially extended citizenship to those people to escape from that violence and come here.
So this has become a very big issue recently. Elon Musk has spoken out repeatedly about this. Of course, he is from South Africa. He's talked about this being, quote, a genocide of white people in South Africa, accusing the South African government of failing to address violence against white farmers, promoting policies that he considers to be anti-white. For instance, he has cited a song, an anti-apartheid song called Kill the Boer, which calls for violence against white South Africans, describing it as actively promoting white genocide. There's been a lot of criticism as well of some of the land reform laws because Elon Musk has, and these are his words, I'm going to quote him, described South Africa's land expropriation laws as, quote, racist ownership laws. And he's alleged that this is basically the legalized seizure of property from white people without compensation. Again, it's all being done in the name of justice, right? A different kind of reparations, if you were, because of the history that has happened there in that country. But people who, like President Trump and Elon Musk, feel that the white South Afrikaners are being unjustly racially profiled and up against a kind of genocide or violence would point to things like this. I'm going to show you some video of some white crosses there in South Africa. I realize it's a little bit hard to hear over that helicopter, but they just go on for seemingly miles. These are white crosses that represent the unjust deaths of these white South African farmers. And so again, this goes back to concerns that this is a form of genocide that's going on there, a white genocide, as Elon Musk has referred to it. But the left is very upset. They're very upset because they're like, wait a second, what about all the people that are coming here, all the people that should be allowed into this country that were allowed in under Biden's administration? Why are they being sent to El Salvador? Donald Trump would say, well, because in many cases, we know that they have criminal records and they're being sent out for that reason, as opposed to the people that are coming here to escape the genocide going on in South Africa, whom we know have a certain profile background in terms of being nonviolent, right? Nonviolent, contributing members of society. And that's been a big part of what he wants. He wants to lay out the red carpet for people who want to come here and contribute to our economy that are not violent people. On the other hand, if you have traffickers or people associated with gangs, etc., then they're no-go territory. And that should be kind of obvious, but Rick Stengel, who used to be the executive editor, I don't believe he still is, at Time, was on MSNBC this morning talking about this, and I'll let him voice the other side of this argument, and you can see that somehow there's a justification in some of these people's heads that these people deserve it, and therefore we should not be accepting them or allowing them into our country, believe it or not. Watch.
If the outlines of Trump's mass deportation plans weren't already clear, earlier today, the Trump administration formally lifted protection from deportation for Afghans in the United States, claiming that conditions in the Taliban-controlled nation of Afghanistan had improved enough for them to go home safely. Nearly simultaneously, a U.S. charter plane carrying dozens of South Africans, known as Afrikaners, the white ethnic minority that created and led the brutal apartheid regime in South Africa, landed in the United States of America, where the Trump administration has admitted them as refugees here, claiming that they have been discriminated against for jobs and have been victimized by violence, expediting a process that normally takes years. That happened as Donald Trump has virtually halted refugee admission in America for people fleeing.
God, I know. I'm sorry. She's so painful. It takes her forever to get any of her words out, but bear with me because it is important to hear what Rick Stengel has to say.
War and famine in places like Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Back with Rick.
She really shouldn't be on TV, but I digress.
Mark and Eddie. Rick Stengel.
Yes, it's so deeply and morally wrong-headed and repulsive. These are the descendants of the people who created the most diabolical system of white supremacy in human history, apartheid. They're not directly responsible for it, but it was a system that actually moved black people off of the arable land. So they inherited the land that the black people had to give up. It was called forced removal. It was something called a Bantustan policy, where they moved black people out of the cities and farmlands into these remote areas with non-arable land. I mean, it was just one of the most worst processes ever. But what has happened in this strange, bizarre world we're living in is that the Afrikaners have become the darling of these right-wing white supremacist movements around the world, that it's like the lost cause for them. It's like the old Confederacy. They're held up as these white Christians who are being dispossessed of their land. It's like this is a modern replacement theory in a country where, by the way, white people make up 7% of the population and own 78% of the farmland. So it's actually, there's no injustice here. As you mentioned, it's taking places away from refugees who are really being crushed by authoritarian governments and military governments, for these folks who have never had anything happen to them. I mean, Trump amazingly called it a genocide, one of the worst lies I've ever heard him say. There's just been a small handful of farmers that have been killed over the past 10 years. No land has actually been expropriated. So it's just a farce and a sham and a moral ugliness.
So there is a lot of frustration, as you can hear and tell from the left, who say, why aren't you taking more people from El Salvador, et cetera? Why would you allow for these people? Again, on MSNBC, somebody named Eddie Glaude echoing this sentiment.
Eddie, I want to ask you very briefly one other question that is an ethical question. The Trump administration welcoming white South Afrikaners to the U.S. as refugees while denying virtually all other groups fleeing war or persecution. The Episcopal Church's migration service is now refusing a federal directive to help resettle them. The presiding bishop said this: "It has been painful to watch one group of refugees selected in a highly unusual manner receive preferential treatment over many others who have been waiting in refugee camps or dangerous conditions for years." Does this move show who the administration sees as worthy? What do you see in that decision?
Absolutely. Donald Trump and his minions have been arguing for over the last decade or so that, you know, the demographic shifts in the country pose an existential threat to America. They feel like they're losing their country. And so I think what we see very clearly here, Chris, is a white nationalist agenda at work. And we need to call it for what it is.
Whoa. Okay. So just so we all have our facts right, in January of 2025, they passed what's known as the Expropriation Act that was signed into law by the government there in South Africa, allowing the government to seize land without compensation in specific circumstances, such as it is deemed to be in the public interest, or to, quote, redress past racial dispossession. A 2017 land audit showed that white South Africans owned about 72% of agricultural land despite being a minority, and this has thus fueled this push for a redistribution of land, because it is believed that that was created from apartheid. So in order to right the wrong, you're now going to go in and take the land. The government insists that expropriation is following certain legal frameworks. They're prioritizing unused or unutilized land, and there is no mass seizures of white-owned farmland. They are saying, however, critics, including critics like Elon Musk, argue that this law is disproportionately targeting white landowners and thus amounts to racial discrimination. So that is the problem, okay? That's the problem. Donald Trump is saying, I believe that those people are being discriminated against for political reasons and are therefore entitled to come to the U.S. with refugee asylum status. By the way, not a ton of people have applied because a lot of people still want to stay in South Africa and they have property there that they want to protect, etc. And so they're not all flooding in. But for those that want to come in, he's extending this refugee status. And boy, is that making the left furious,